I would just reiterate that we are in a really fabulous zone on our schedule in terms of guests. I hope you all enjoyed Shane Hutton last Monday from Arcana Academy, and Nader Tehrani on Thursday, one of the greatest architects of his generation, which I unfortunately happen to share his generation, so that's bad luck for me because he's really superb. We're continuing in that vein today. Our guest is M.K. Haley. M.K. Haley has been with the Walt Disney Company since 1994, serving primarily with Walt Disney Imagineering in both technical and creative roles. She has worked with virtual reality teams, research and development, special FX, show quality services, and the Disney Research Labs. These teams support projects with lead times ranging from 10 years to critical in-park issues in need of immediate solutions. She has also worked on Disney corporate initiatives related to new technology programs and collaboration tools, as well as Disney digital media. MK has been an educator for 20 years, teaching at both the high school and university level, drawing on both her industry experience and her education experience to facilitate in-depth interactions that are changing the design landscape for both sides of the equation. She has taught in the following areas: building virtual worlds, themed entertainment, experience design, make note of that, we'll be asking some questions about that, computer graphics and animation, best practices in personal and professional presentation. Her research has focused on collaboration cultures and best practices and themed entertainment. We're very lucky to have her as our guest today. Please join me in welcoming M.K. Haley.
Hello, and good morning. That was total deja vu what he just said, because that's exactly what I told my class on Thursday. I'm teaching an experimental class, and it's as important for the faculty to put together a curriculum and share information with you as it is for you all to give that information right back to the faculty. So I like to hear other good people saying the things I'm saying. I'm excited to be here. This is a really fascinating program you have. You're lucky to have such a wide variety of speakers come and share their time and wisdom with you. It's fairly intimidating to look at the slate of speakers you've had this semester, see what little bit I can add to that. We're certainly not going to be able to cover everything of interest to you right now. Please do know that you can contact me whenever you like. I am mk.haley@disney.com. Don't forget that dot between the MK and the Haley. I work with about 4,000 students a year, some of them only for an hour or two and others for longer stretches, but you do have really good industry resources available to you, so take advantage of them when they offer those services. So I want to thank you for coming this morning. It's a beautiful day outside there just before winter looms on Boston. I am a native, so I will be speaking wicked fast. The code my students use for slow down is this. So if I'm talking too fast, just tell me to slow down. There's a lot of reasons why being able to speak to folks like you is extremely valuable to me and others in the industry. So I really do appreciate the fact that you've invited me in this larger forum, and hopefully there will be a lot of conversation afterwards as well, because I am at your disposal. You do know that I can see iPhones on every single person's face who has it on right now, because it's reflecting on your face. So unless you're taking down my email, try and do that later maybe. As was mentioned, I have a very odd and diverse history, and certainly not a career path that I ever planned or could have possibly planned. There's a lot of different things that I've done in the past 30 years, and a lot of them that I've actually done concurrently. I heard a high school teacher once say, "Oh, it's so exciting to see your career moved along like a ladder." I said, "No, it did this. Nothing moved along ladder-wise." I did my undergraduate at UMass Amherst. I did my graduate work at Cal State LA. At the time that I was an undergrad in the early 80s, there was no such thing as a degree in computer design or computer animation for designers. Computer scientists had been doing it for a while, but artists hadn't yet had a formal focused degree. So at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, they put together a program that pulled from lots of other different programs. I had to take classes at Amherst College, Smith College, in the engineering department, computer science department, and art department, to sort of put together this hodgepodge sort of experience that equaled design, animation, with computers wrapped all around it. And that's where I first figured out that if what you want isn't exactly there, or if you're tasked with solving a problem that isn't necessarily straightforward, you can pick and choose. You can pull from non-traditional sources to pack together what you actually need. And that has quite by accident become a theme of my entire career. The graduate work I did, although I was an MFA in a design program, I was also artist in residence at NASA. So I worked with JPL astronauts to help sort of get some of their data visualizations. That was pretty awesome and not something I ever thought I'd do in grade school or high school. When I came to Disney, I started as an intern. Call me if anyone's interested in internship. I started as an intern 21 years ago and had never been to a Disney theme park. I grew up in Weymouth. I grew up down the road. And I grew up from a family of 20 children. You don't go to Disney World. But that was great. So my interview went, "You're an artist who can code on a Unix box?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Can you start tomorrow?" And I was all, "So we're not going to look at my portfolio?" "Oh, yes, I can start tomorrow." That's the right answer. And ever since I've been there, I have had the title of both creative director and technical director, because it's a matter of what actually you're doing and what skills you put towards that, not so much what your degree was 20 years ago. Everything is built upon the prior experience. It's also a project-based industry. Anyone involved in any of the creative arts especially, and even engineering, you will go more and more towards a project-based industry. The idea of starting for a company and retiring from that company when you're 65 years old doesn't exist anymore. You have to be flexible enough to go to where the work is. And sometimes you get to, sometimes you have to, depending upon your point of view, get to do a lot of really, really interesting things. So while I have been with Disney for 20 years, I have also been loaned out here and there as faculty. Teaching at USC and UCLA is no problem. They're right down the road. I was adjunct faculty with a program at Carnegie Mellon University, the Entertainment Technology Center, which was set up by a professor who did a sabbatical with us at Disney. So I was connected with him from sitting in our parking lot thinking up ideas as to how can we make education more reflect business. Most campuses have your engineering department over here, drama's over here, business is over here, and you never actually cross paths unless you dine in the same commissary. How do you force those interactions? Because in the real world, particularly production worlds where you have to collaborate, you don't live in separate pods. You actually work very closely together. That's the business model that Imagineering had, and they wanted to help design educational programs that supported that. So from 2009 to 2013, I lived in Pittsburgh and was co-chair of that program. It was founded in 1997. One of the co-founders passed away and I replaced him. And that was a really fascinating experience because I had 82 countries with 200 students in my class, and every single one of them brought a different point of worldview, different culture, different expertise, because they had all different sorts of undergrads. And what they were able to produce as a result of that diversity was really, really inspirational. At the same time, I work for Disney Research Lab in Pittsburgh. I don't know if you knew, we have a research lab in Pittsburgh. So if you love snow and want to stay in the East Coast and work for Disney, it's totally possible. So that was a 3-year stint. It became clear that the Disney research program we had needed a little more connection to the mothership, which was in California. So I moved back to California to head up tech transfer between our research groups and our many different divisions. For the past 28 years or so, I have worked with SIGGRAPH, which is a special interest group in computer graphics and interactive technologies. Every single one of you should belong to an industry association. Ideally, something directly connected to your course of study. Anything different, anything that differentiates you, gives you experience with people's processes, conferences, above and beyond what you do every day, is hugely valuable. Not only your resume as just a line item, but also personally and professionally. So I highly encourage that. If you don't know what the top associations are for your major, ask any one of your professors. They're all probably members and maybe even serve on their boards. So in 2013, I was conference chair, which is a 4.5-year volunteer commitment. It was a $9 million budget that I oversaw, and my entire crew was volunteer. I had about 300 volunteers who worked for us. There's no way you do that unless the Walt Disney Company says you can do that. So a large part of the success of collaboration in merging all these different disciplines and priorities in education and academia and industry relies upon not only you willing to be able to do it, but your management and support systems being able to support it as well. So it sounds fairly easy. Just get this, this, and this equals awesome. Not so easy, because operationally and administratively it is very challenging. This fall, in September, I moved to Tallahassee. I was invited by Florida State University to head up a new program they have called the Center for Environmental Storytelling. And talking to the dean there about, well, what does that mean? He said, I don't know, you're defining and building it. Disney has several official relationships with universities. They tend to be with one world-class department. You know, the robotics group at Carnegie Mellon University, for example, CalArts out in California for animation and illustration. This is the first official relationship we've had with the liberal arts program. And the first time I went to meet them, which was earlier this spring, I met with 17 chairs. Every single one of them had a program that was relevant to the Walt Disney Company, whether it was engineering and new materials, robotics, some of the business system processes they were working on. So although it looks like the Walt Disney Company is being really cool by letting me teach there for 20 weeks a year, in reality, it's a two-way street. We're getting a heck of a lot of value out of this partnership. And when people say, well, why not University of Central Florida? Why not Florida? They didn't ask. Florida State came to us with a beautiful presentation as to why, as corporate citizens, it would make sense. We are the single largest employer in the state of Florida, and entertainment is the single largest industry. And then also, there's all the great connections we could make. So for 20 weeks a year, I live in Tallahassee now. And then the 32 other weeks of the year, I've just recently relocated to our Orlando team, where my job is kind of that illustration. There are a lot of things in our parks that is officially nobody's job with Walt Disney Imagineering, and those have now become my job. For example, we've spent the past 10 years or so a very focused initiative on putting interactives in our parks. Has anyone ever done an interactive queue or done anything on their phone or enjoyed our Magic Band system? Those are all initiatives that existed for very specific reasons. Help pass the time while you're in line, help tell a story perhaps while you're in a queue to get you prepared for some of the things that were coming up next. We've never done a comprehensive analysis of that. In all fairness, can I ask third shift maintenance to fix that thing that broke again? And the answer might be absolutely yes, and put 10 on hold because it's such a popular and valuable thing, but we don't know. So that means I'm working with operations, maintenance, guest services, the original designers. I'm not pissing any of them off as I kind of question the work they're doing. And the reason that I'm qualified to do that, which is engineering, research, and design, is because of this crazy, wonky path I had. What happened? And thinking of coming and talking to you all here today, these are the top 5 design thinking sort of paradigms that you work with every day. And looking at each of one of these and thinking, well, what on earth can I presume to tell you about? When I talk to both academic folks and industry folks who seem bemused by what I do or how I do it, it's the front one. It's empathize. This is what I tend to do differently but don't know that I was doing it differently over the years. And this is understanding and advocating, championing for who is your target demographic, who is your stakeholder, who's the little voice who's always saying, what about the introverts? This is a really great idea for the extroverts who are going to jump up and down the table and demand to be seen. What about the third grader whose eye height is only here? He's just going to get a view of backsides if we don't open up this area and let more visual things in. And this first became very clear. I was working on, my point of view for empathizing has always been on my teams. Not only as our guests or our students, who my primary demographic is in order to advocate for them, but also my team itself, my designers, my engineers. How do I make sure that they are well educated, happy, and supported so they can go ahead and do these things? Because as I mentioned, collaboration is hard. Finding diverse skill sets is hard. Working with 50 languages in one program is really hard. I was filing a patent when I was doing some work with the television group at ABC, and they kicked it back to me because I had put the lawyer's name on the wrong line. And they said, no, I think that's the right line. They said, no, the lawyer doesn't have ideas. I said, no, the lawyer did have it. What do you mean the lawyer doesn't have ideas? What I didn't know, I had my lawyer in my design meeting every week. There's so many intricacies in television law, broadcast law, that's mind-boggling. And they're like 10-year contracts, so you really have to work well within these for anything you want to propose. So he was in our meeting, and instead of saying no when we put forth the final product, he was in every single meeting and said yes and as we proposed anything. We were trying to do interactive television experiences for both children, teenagers, and adults. And he had contributed an original idea, and he did belong on the patent. And the executives went, oh, They didn't understand why my group had so many successful things taken to market so quickly, and neither did I, right? I'm like, I'm just doing the same thing as the other teams, right? I get 2 engineers and 1 designer. What I didn't realize is including some of the business and law folks on the front end were very, very different. And that is, I've always, for me, it's a badge of honor if one of my team members gets promoted out of my team. You cry a little because you lost somebody great, but you've given them the structure and the tool set to move forward, and it's a tiny industry. They'll come back. They'll come back to you someday. So getting back to my little Venn diagram here, this is very much how I do business. When I'm working in academia, the students are thrilled / terrified that they do get a lot of very practical business experience. They do get a lecture on how you should dress for an interview. They are held accountable for their writing skills. And they're like, what the, this is I'm designing fireworks show. Why do I have to care about my spelling? And then the opposite is true as well. When I'm in industry, they're surprised that I care about teaching my teams, that I care about providing them the tool set to move forward. And that is apparently weird on both sides. Some of my students at Carnegie Mellon had pointed out that some of the more elite universities in America especially pride themselves on the weeding out phase. They're going to make it so hard you're going to flunk out and like, look to your left, look to your right. 2 of you will be gone by graduation. And that is absolutely not how I roll. I will hold you to a ridiculously high standard, but I will give you the tools to succeed. When you get an F on that paper, we will sit and go over it and make sure the next time you have a paper you can do well. Who knows who this is? Who's that? That's U2 and Luciano Pavarotti. He's an opera singer. This is a fantastic example of taking disparate disciplines and expertise, smashing them together and creating something that was not possible before. What both of these entities had going for them was that they were super famous already. World-class performers, they had a little bit of street cred, right? And so they were able to pull something a little ridiculous off. The estimate is that more than 1 billion people who didn't know a thing about opera or rock and roll were exposed to both as a result of the collaboration between this famous opera singer and these rock stars. So not only was the final work they produced really, really well accepted, and this is over 10 years old now at this point, but what it did in terms of exposure was pretty revolutionary as well. And there's lots of really good examples from history of this. Who knows what that is? It's 1450. That is the Gutenberg printing press. And it wasn't a terribly revolutionary idea, right? It was a coin punch partnered with a wine press, but just by allowing movable type on pages, allowed print media to be printed en masse and allowed a lot more information to be distributed around the world. And it was the start of the Renaissance because suddenly it allowed folks access to information that they didn't have before, particularly the poorer classes. And again, not revolutionary. A lot of folks are terrified at the idea of you have to have an idea. You need to be creative. When Bob Iger took over the Walt Disney Company from Michael Eisner, he did a bit of not dissolving, but sort of spreading around teams with creative in their title, because he said everybody's creative, right? Everybody has ideas. And for some folks, this was a terrifying thought. No, they didn't. They were the front desk receptionists. They didn't have ideas. Please don't make me have an idea. So we put in place systems to encourage you to have ideas, safe ways to submit original ideas, training. We actually had some folks who came to us with ideas, and we made sure we beat them out of it. You know, you're not supposed to have ideas. So if you want the least intimidating possible way to enter into the universe of creativity, rather than reinventing fire, think about how you can take things that already exist, people, talents, wine presses, and corn punches, and just mash them together and see what comes up at the end. Has anyone ever seen this structure? This is so badass, it's amazing. On the left is a living and dining retail complex. What's on that? What's that thing on the right? That is a termite mound. That is correct. That is a termite mound. So this was a complex that was bid out. One of the requirements, and this is, by the way, in the Arabian desert, one of the requirements for the build was no air conditioning or heating systems. How do you build a facility in the desert with no air conditioning or heating systems? Well, it turns out you look to termites. The way that termites build their mounds is they have water at the bottom and all these little side channels. Wind blows in from either side depending upon the time of day or night and provides a very cool, comfortable, consistent climate year-round. Using that exact same model, they built this, it's called the Eastgate Center in Zimbabwe, and they saved $3.5 million alone on the original build, construction-wise, because they didn't have to put in HVAC systems, air conditioning and heating systems. But then throughout the rest of this facility's life, every year they save 90% on what they would have paid prior on heating and air conditioning costs. And these are ideas that existed. These are ideas that existed long before human beings. It was only when a construction firm gave the challenge of, you can't, who's going to be crazy enough to bid on this project when you can't put in traditional heating and ventilation systems. This is also ridiculously amazing. This is in the Czech Republic. It was built in 1938. The gentleman who ran this was one of the wealthiest men in Europe for many, many years, and he made shoes. He was a shoe manufacturer. On the far left there, you can see his office. There's a little silver sliver on the desk, on the side of the desk. Does anyone want to guess what that is? It's his assistant's chair. You pull it out, flip it down, she sits and takes notes, up, slides back in. This man, no nonsense. He was a no nonsense sort of fella. Very, very efficient in terms of what he got done. If you look at the center picture there, you're looking out his office into the hallway. What is to the left of his door and above his door? His door, it's an elevator. To the left is the button to push and call the elevator, and above are the buttons. On the far right, you can see the up and down office. This man's office was an elevator that traveled the length of the building up and down in 1938. He, running a factory of shoes, had lots of divisions, right? He had manufacturing, he had shipping and receiving, he had marketing, he had sales, all on different floors. The idea is that communication is one of the hardest things you can do, particularly when you have disparate disciplines who might not even speak the same vernacular. How do you stay in contact with them? How do you stay in touch with what they're doing? Well, his suggestion was just go there. It's Monday, I'm going to be on the shipping floor. Boop, doors would open, and he would spend the day in direct contact with that office. Very few people have repeated this idea. This building still exists. The elevator's all the way at the bottom right now. It doesn't work anymore. But it was a revolutionary idea for him to stay as connected as possible, to communicate what his priorities were, and to have each of his teams communicate back to them what their priorities and challenges were in the shoe biz. Thomas Allen, who's over at MIT, did a partnership with BMW for the new BMW Design Center in Munich. Has anyone seen that? Google it. It is ridiculous. When you can start from scratch and can build whatever facility you want to enhance cross-collaboration, what they've got is a giant glass building so you can see each other. There's a balance of conversation, but also quiet. There are glass rooms with doors, so I can see you, but I don't necessarily have to hear you. And they're working on a physical thing. They're working on cars, right? So there's a glass tube in the center of the building where anyone from the building can always see the latest version they're working on. You may be 4 floors away, but you can look down and say, oh yeah, that window there on the left is what we're talking about. So in cooperation with the folks from MIT, the architects on this sat down before they laid a single brick or pane of glass to talk about in what ways do you facilitate cross-disciplinary team interaction? How do you get them to talk well to each other? So his research has proven that the probability of 2 of you in an organization commuting with each other declines rapidly based upon how far away you are from each other. So where is your office in that building? And how often do you communicate? They pulled associates, admins out of the equation because it's their job to communicate with people, and they just talked about individual team members with straightforward responsibilities, engineering, business, and the like. So the probability of you talking to each other declines to almost 0 if you're more than 80 meters apart horizontally. If somebody is 81 meters away from you on the same floor, the likelihood that you talk to them goes to almost 0. Forget the floor above you or the floor below you. In an industry or in any business where this is critical that you talk to each other, just knowing this helps, awareness helps, and there's other things you can do. They had the ability to build a building from the ground up. One of the things I experimented with in my office was changing where the coffee pot was. People change their traffic patterns based upon resources that they went to a lot. Has anyone ever been to the Pixar building up in Emeryville? They've got one giant, looks a little bit like this beautiful hardwood floor atrium. Everybody's mailboxes in the entire building are on this side, commissaries on this side. So at some point in the day, you will all converge in this one center place. The original blueprints called for all the restrooms in the building to be there as well, and people didn't care for that. That was a function that they didn't care to walk too far for, so Steve Jobs had to pull back on that idea. So it seems as if this is fairly easy, right? Diversity of experience on your team, diversity of talent, and communication across team equals awesome success, right? Not necessarily. So at Carnegie Mellon, they did research on success in groups. So the Carnegie Mellon Entertainment Technology Center program is a project-based master's degree. So you put on teams of 4 to 8 for a semester-long project with an actual client, and you deliver a physical working thing at the end of the semester. It could be a podium with monitors and buttons in it. It could be an iPad app. It could be something. They had a very high rate of success as compared to other programs and wanted to evaluate why. What were the best practices that led to such a high rate of success? The presumption was that diversity drove success and innovation. And after researching over 60 individual projects over about 8 years, the dean of what is now the business school there came up with some research. And this was just published about a month ago. She's still pouring through the data and what will come out. So more diversity leads to more conflict, substantially more conflict. You talk different languages, literally both where you come from, but also artists and engineers use different verbiage. I worked at the television group at Disney for a very long time before I realized programming wasn't typey. Programming is the order of TV show I had. It was like 3 weeks, and I'm like, why are there so many programmers here who aren't computer scientists? So that's a language barrier as well. So although diversity leads to more conflict, it also leads to a much higher quality and more innovative products. So diversity makes for a challenging process, but it leads to much better results. The purple there, which I added, is with support. You don't just throw 6 grad students in a room, shut the door, hope they come out in 15 weeks with something awesome. There is going to be conflict. There are going to be hurdles they don't understand. Conflict with each other, conflict with a paying client, and you have to provide the proper support mechanism for that to thrive. And that includes not only understanding that it takes more time when you have people with different disciplines working together, as much as conflict resolution. Give them tools to start in the semester. Don't just wait until there's a problem. Give them a good foundation, and then be there to support them when things go wrong. There's lots of very good tools. If it escalates to a point where you don't have the expertise, we'll bring in a subject matter expert. We'll bring in somebody from career services or somebody from mental health if the team is just completely imploding. But with support, these sorts of things are much more able to happen. So at a very high level, I just wanted to plant those seeds in your head that understand where your diversity comes from. You all are going to graduate with a piece of paper that has a degree on it, right? But you're so much more than that. Did you come from a family of 20 or did you come from a family of 1? That changes your worldview. I have a student at Carnegie Mellon who refused to go on a field trip, which was whitewater rafting, because he was worth more than all the other babies. Does anyone get that? Why would he think? The nicest kid, not the least bit selfish or self-centered, why would he feel he couldn't go on a whitewater rafting trip because he was worth more than other babies? Yep, Chinese one-child policy. In China, they have a one-child policy, and he had no brothers or sisters. He had 2 parents and 4 grandparents, 6 adults whose DNA streamed through him. All of their hopes and dreams and money were invested in this one child, and he had a crushing obligation to not put himself at physical risk. That I can't even comprehend that, right? That he wasn't arrogant and believed he was better, but he believed he had more value because he was the only one in his DNA stream. And that matters. That matters when you're dealing with students who come from those places. It matters when you're designing for those places. Disney is building a park in Shanghai right now. Most Disney parks start with a main street and the big castle at the end and a train station at the other end. In Shanghai, we're building it with train station at the end, castle at the other end. In between, along what would be the main street, is giant grassy park areas, because we know at least 4 out of each party, grandparents, will be older. They can't stand all day. They need places to sit on benches and just chill and relax out. And that is very specifically a response to research we've done and partnerships we have with people who represent these different cultures. So with that little seed in your head on, it's going to be hard, but it's worth it, take the time to get other points of view. 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds tell you really interesting things, as well as senior citizens. Now we're going to yap. Okay.
Shall we repeat the email?
mk.haley@disney.com.
If I were in this audience, I would be sending you a message.
And some of the questions are fairly easy. Some are pretty wacky. There's a gentleman I'm working with right now who I met when he was in 6th grade. Mm-hmm. He first pinged me, he had a question about some attraction or something, and we just, over the years, kept in touch, like every other year, right? Not very long. He ended up doing his master's at Pitt when I was at Carnegie Mellon, and we reconnected. He's doing work right now. He was in the Air Force ROTC, so he's doing work with the Air Force that is very connected to work Disney is doing. So you never know where things will interconnect over the years.
Well, first off, I prepared some questions to get us going, but obviously the first one that I don't know about the rest of the audience, but I'm just overwhelmed by is 20 children.
Yep.
Okay, that's a lot.
It is. Does anyone else come from a large family?
Large family? Other people from large families? How many in your family? 10?
10.
Wow, that's a lot. Anybody can beat 10? Okay.
Now, I am 16th out of 20, so I'm on the bottom half. One set of twins. I have an identical twin who's at Virginia Military Institute. And one generation away from Irish immigrants where they were very used to building up for the farm.
Sure.
I don't live on a farm. I've never lived on a farm, but culturally my parents came from a place where not a lot of your children survived, so you had a lot.
That's right.
And also you needed them to work the farm. So my father is heartbroken that each one of us don't have 20.
Right.
But
Right. Well, he's an empire builder.
yeah, exactly.
Right. And by the way, I appreciated your pointing out the many interesting consequences at the other end of the spectrum of the China one-child policy, which are going to manifest themselves continually, actually, in the coming decades. Anyway, but it's too early to digress. So let me just ask, there's so much to talk about, but let me just ask a general question at the beginning about, you've been at Disney entirely in, let's say, the digital age.
Correct.
But it seems to me that one of the sort of large-scale differentiations that one can make about a company as varied and diverse and a finger in every pie as Disney is between the digital and the physical world. In other words, if it started out with Steamboat Willie, the 1928 little first Disney cartoon, very short, and then it became, let's say, feature-length movies, and then franchises of feature-length movies, and then in the 50s, Disneyland opens.
Right, 1955.
So it kind of, in a way, you could say it started in I'm going to call it let's say, the non-physical world, at least. It wasn't the digital world then, but it started in the visual world of imagination. Then the sort of the big thing that differentiates Disney maybe from a lot of other companies, at least in terms of their histories, is that it then went into the physical world.
And that was very specifically tied back to the original 2D visual world. There was two reasons Disneyland parks were built. One was Walt really wanted a way for you to interact with his characters. These were great stories, great characters. A lot of them had really rich traditions if they came from fairy tales. How do I not just watch that on a screen, but how do I get to talk to you, interact with you, have more adventures, understand your personality? And the other was, and this is hard to believe in 2014, but in the 50s, there was really nothing for families to do as a group. Maybe go to the beach or the park. But in general, families didn't play together. And so he would see, there's a famous little carousel in Griffith Park in LA where he says, I would sit and I would watch my girls on the carousel sitting on the bench watching them. And he said, I wanted some sort of, he calls it an amusement enterprise. I wanted an amusement enterprise where families could actually have fun together. And so those two things combined had him build a physical space. There was nobody who was doing that. Amusement parks at the time were kind of shady and crazy, shifty people. So his was going to be the opposite of that. But all the verbs you had to use to describe it were like a carnival, but not. And the people he pulled were from his film division, his animation division. So a lot of the verbiage that we still use is very much related to film and theater. We have front of stage, back of stage, cast members.
So in a lot of ways, it has been an experience design enterprise from the very beginning.
Even
though that's a term we use much more self-consciously much later.
But Walt was much more aware that that's what he was specifically doing. Some of the early cartoons, he wanted you to cry when he wanted you to cry. He wanted you to cheer when he wanted you to cheer. When Three Little Pigs came out, which was massively successful, who knows why the Three Little Pigs was so successful? It resonated with the American consciousness because the Depression. It came out right during the Depression. The Big Bad Wolf very well represented the Depression. And so people were clamoring, theater owners were clamoring for Three Little Pigs too, because it was such a moneymaker. And Walt's like, no, that was a specific thing that told a specific story for very specific reasons. You don't just slap a 2 on it. Once you have people who trust your brand, there are people who will take their kids to a Disney or Pixar film, no questions asked. In the history of forever, nobody has said, the next 20th Century Fox picture's coming out. But that's because over time we've built a reputation, and every time we put out a Frozen or a Big Hero 6 opening in theaters in a week. Oh my God, it's awesome. I've seen it, it's awesome. You put more money in what's called the trust bank.
Right.
Every time you put out something that is a little more questionable, you're taking money out of that trust bank, and you want to make sure you're never pulling out, because you never want people to have to question, is this one my kids can see, or do I have to check it out first?
Right. Well, I can certainly understand that point about how, especially in something that is so retail and so engaging with such a broad audience. But Disney, now if we say that it's like one of the original, or maybe the original experience design company that have foregrounded that as their primary enterprise, it is now in so many things. I suspect I know the answer to this question, but I want to probe a little bit. How would Disney define itself as a company today? Because it does lots of different things. It doesn't just do movies.
Right.
It doesn't just do parks. First of all, what are the scope of the things that it does do, and then how would it define itself as a company?
So I've been there over 20 years and have been through several iterations of this. The company is constantly reevaluating, reproposing, reevaluating. Right now, within the past year or so, we've really narrowed it down to happy people make the world a better place. That doesn't say ESPN,
Right.
Doesn't say theme parks, movies, fruit juice and underpants, everything that has our name on it. But it's a goal that all of us aspire to.
Right.
And if you're questioning whether we should do something or not, if you go back to that high-level idea that happy people make the world a better place, it's sort of, things fall out quickly. We have the world's most successful cruise line. We usually booked at about 96, 98% capacity. We have no gambling on our cruise ships, because we are a family entertainment company.
Right.
And so we lose millions by not having gambling. However, it doesn't fit this
Right.
trust
Right,
agreement
right,
that we
right,
have with
right,
you.
right.
For a long time, Imagineering, which is the group that designs and builds our theme parks, hotels, and cruise ships, and Walt Disney World Parks and Resorts had diametrically opposed mission statements. Imagineering created family-friendly experience, pushing the bounds of innovation and creativity. Park operations had to make money in a responsible way. Those are not necessarily. So in the past 10 years or so, especially when Mr. Iger came on board, we've realigned those visions and we are much better partners. If anyone has seen the new expansion of Fantasyland and Magic Kingdom, and you know what, if you're in Orlando, call me. I just moved there. I give a really good tour.
Should do that.
We got in touch with operations, food and beverage. They participated from day one in the design process. So instead of us designing something and throwing it over the fence to them, they were as much important. We mocked up everything in virtual spaces, and so the cast members could go through and figure out, no, that's blocking my view.
You prototyped it.
Yeah, we
and you
prototyped
tested
it in a cave, yep.
Right.
So the chef for the Be Our Guest facility walked in 8 months before we laid a single brick and tested his kitchen and said, you know what, there needs to be a drain right there.
Right,
and I need to see that thing over there, and there's a water pipe in the way, so you need to move that water pipe.
Right.
And so by having a much more collaborative partnership, and that's true across divisions, feature animation develops something innovative, TV animation will be using it a year later. ESPN does amazing things in the sports world, but because they're broadcast television, that is so applicable to what we do in television animation and broadcast animation. So we share them.
I wonder how many people in here who watch ESPN were aware that it's a Disney thing. Who was aware of that? Lots of you?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, and I'm not going to lie. After we bought Pixar, Ed Catmull, who's a chief technical officer of Pixar, came to us and said, we need actual R&D. Disney has always had a group called R&D, but he says, I'm talking lab coat wearing, clipboard carrying, research, thinking 20 years out. And so we hired some of the world's best scientists, none of whom wanted to move to Burbank, by the way, most of whom were tenured professors. So that's why our first two labs were opened in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon and also at ETH in Zurich. So many of our researchers are both still faculty and researchers for us from all over the world. If you are the world's foremost authority on robotics, you might not, how would you know Disney owns ESPN? So a big part of my job when I was head of tech transfer was making sure that these diverse groups understood what our whole portfolio was, and they're so excited. When they can go to a park and look, I had my moment where I'm like, oh, you boys get it. I had 20 new postdocs. I was touring around the park. It was, a 4 a.m. to a midnight sort of excursions. They were exhausted and sweaty and tired. And we saw a character meet and greet that had some technology that they had helped support. And one of my postdocs pointed to the little girl, and he said, that is what I do. The smile on her face, he didn't point to the motor in Mickey Mouse's head. He pointed to the little girl and he said, isn't that what I do? And I said, yes,
Right.
correctamundo, that is what you do.
Right. Well, this whole business about, obviously, first off, this class is filled with people who are majoring, as you speculated, in all kinds of different things. Lots of engineers, but business people and also people majoring in other things. So they don't foreground design process. They don't, as part of their regular curriculum. I think it's pretty safe to say. Some of them may take an art or a design course here and there, but this business of, and you hit on all of them, though you focused on empathy, you hit on all of the 5 sort of pieces in this circular process that continues to circle back on itself and iterate again and again. But, and by the way, and when you say Disney owns ESPN, I totally suddenly understand why it has the branded attitude that it has, and why efforts by Fox to simulate that seem so much less successful, at least to my eyes. I don't know if others of you have watched. There's a competing, Fox is trying to make a pretty concerted effort to compete with ESPN, and it's so clearly a junior varsity effort, in my view, no matter how many people they hire.
And it is super tempting to do the easy thing.
Well, they're just trying to do what you do, right?
So, and as for, we have all kinds of examples where it's faster, better, cheaper, slap a Band-Aid on it, and then, immediately you go, whoops, should have stuck to our core competencies.
Right. Well, be that as it may, I mean, the business of the sports example is just interesting because it's an application of the brand that is not self-evident.
Right.
In other words, if we talked about children's sleepwear or something like that, would be like, well, of course you do that.
Right.
But I am interested in how, and maybe you can take us through, let's say, how a particular kind of project that you have dealt with, where this cycle, it's one thing to talk about collaboration, and I'll number myself as completely convinced. So now that you've won, that argument has been won. When you guys take on a project and you have a team assembled, I mean, we've had people from IDEO here and other collaborators.
As have we. We consult with the best in the world as well.
They're rock stars. They're so good, I think. But actually, lots of good, Gensler, the architecture firm Gensler, does this very well.
Leapfrog does it really well.
Yeah, I've heard of them, but I'm not aware of. I don't know people there. But in any case, this business of structurally, see, so many people think of creativity as a discrete thing that you inherit or just happens to you.
Right, you are or you aren't.
You are, you aren't. It's like, I'm good at math, I'm not good at math. I'm creative, I'm not creative. This course is part of a long-standing effort on my part to rid the world of that perspective. And so I want you to maybe, if you can, talk us through the iterative process, the how you guys circle in on, when you start with a big enough circle that nobody knows what the outcome is going to be, and you slowly tighten the noose until at the end you've got 8 or 9 people from disparate backgrounds agreeing that, yeah, that's the thing, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and it's that was nice and smooth what you did. That's not how it works
Right,
at all,
right,
of course. And it's very similar to any design process, or you picking out your outfit in the morning, right? You all make design choices every day.
Right.
You choose things out of the closet and you put them on, and it doesn't work for functional reasons. Oh, it's raining today, I need to change my shoes.
Right.
Or I've lost 20 pounds and it's baggy, I have to choose another blouse. So there's lots of stakeholders and input on this. I would say that about 50% of the work Imagineering does comes out of our teams, Creative Blue Sky, and are proposed to the parks. The other 50% come to us as requests, the Fantasyland expansion. The single largest, most popular theme park in the world, the most popular land in the most popular theme park, it is hitting capacity every day. How do we expand capacity? So it's a very real operational and business need.
Right.
So then you have to sit and creatively think, what are ways to solve that problem that will last 50 years?
Right.
When you're a company that's been around for almost 100 years, you have the luxury of looking forward 100 years and presuming similar. And so we make decisions based upon that. One of the most interesting challenges we just tried to solve was lines. Nobody likes waiting in queues, right? So the FastPass system was developed, and so that was an operational consideration that came to us. How do we resolve queues?
Why don't you explain just a little bit what the FastPass thing is?
Yes, so the FastPass system is you take your theme park ticket, You pop in a little machine, and out pops a little ticket that says, between 1:25 and 2:25 today, you can come back and essentially cut to the front of the queue for this attraction. So you always have the choice for the standby line, which might be a 90-minute, 2-hour wait,
Right.
or you can get this little fast pass, which means you come back later in the day. And that system was fantastic, right? But there were some operational challenges. We used to stow people in queues. Now they weren't in queues. They were around in the common area, so it felt really crowded, even though not necessarily there weren't more bodies in the car.
Right.
And we very much care about the emotional arc of your day. Now, because you used to come in and maybe you had a dinner reservation or fireworks, but aside from that, there was nothing scheduled on your day. And Americans especially now are overscheduled, overstressed. So with this Fast Pass system, people would come in the front gate, and you would go to Space Mountain and get the Fast Passes for us, and I would go to Indiana Jones and get the Fast Passes.
Right.
We'll meet at the hub, we'll cram churros in our face for lunch, and it was this overly scheduled, completely inefficient use of time to walk around parks, and it became
And not the way you had just, not the
Right, yeah, it
narrative
wasn't,
you had in
yeah,
mind.
it wasn't the narrative we had. We walked in a fairly orderly fashion. Thrill, little downtime. Thrill, maybe lunch, right?
But that's not how people were experiencing.
That's not how people were experiencing because suddenly they were zigzagging all over. So we had to, as a group, consider what is our end goal. Happy people make the world a better place. This was a system that was overly stressful. So we've changed how we deploy the Fast Passes based upon attendance. Also, you still have the choice. You're the expert in how to plan your day.
Right.
But we will also, if it's a 10-minute wait, we won't give out Fast Passes.
Right,
We're deciding for you.
Right.
Just wait.
Right.
And at the end of the day, people have a much better experience. And it isn't really about how much money can I get out. It isn't about how much money I can get out of you at all, right? If you didn't have a great time because you were stressed and dragging the kids around and somebody was crying and nobody had their naps or lunch, you're not coming back, right?
Right.
So I don't care how much money you made off you that day. You might never come back. You're not going to come back with your grandkids and so forth. I want you to think of us as a happy place where people have good experiences for your life and for your kids' life and for your grandkids' life. So that was a project between the design teams, operations teams. We do a heck of a lot of guest research and industrial design.
Yeah.
And then another project, which I don't know anything about because I'm not on the team, although they sit right next to me, is the Avatar project. We don't own that IP, right? Mr. James Cameron owns the Avatar IP. So it's a lockdown building. The assets in there affect his net worth, and we have an obligation to keep things more secret than we would for ourselves, right, because of third party. But he comes in with a very specific creative vision. We come in with the expertise on place building and storytelling, expanding his vision. It's not a reproduction of the movie.
Right.
It is Pandora. And there are lots of Pandora that you never saw. So what are the smart choices between his creative vision and our expertise in placemaking?
Pandora was the name of the place.
Pandora's the planet they're
I
on,
see,
yeah.
okay.
People get antsy, right, every time Mr. Cameron's in the building, but
Right.
he's really just a font of wisdom. Joe Rohde is another really great example. He leads our Animal Kingdom and our Ulani resorts. And Joe Rohde can explain to you how old is Africa? You know, when you walk into a village in Africa and you see a stainless steel door on a hut, that is a visual inconsistency. There's nothing about that makes sense in that universe. So everything from the choices to the finishes and the doorknobs and the pathways all combine to tell that complete story. And you get that. At the base of your little newt brain, you understand what is a consistent story and what makes sense in what worlds.
Right,
And
right.
that consistency, which is input from across. So we start with what we call the blue sky. The edge of our table is the blue sky process. The sky is the limit, literally. That used to be a small group, but again, with keeping in mind that blue sky ideas come from everywhere, that's now just a pot of money, so anybody else does blue sky. You define a challenge or an experiment you'd like to do, and then you roll it out. Has anyone ever been to a D23 conference? D23 is Disney Fan Club conference. It's in Anaheim, usually every year. We did some fun beta tests for a blue sky idea last year, which was how do you value emotion with a souvenir purchase? Kind of a high-level, crazy idea. We have expertise in demographic and purchasing behavior, right? But we actually did a fun little beta test where you had to work for a little souvenir that you got, and did you value it more?
Than if it was just given
Then if
to
it was just given to you, or you just bought it straight off the
Right,
shelf and
right,
didn't
right,
have
right.
an experience. And those are the sorts of things that we get to explore, which is a lot of fun. Other companies wouldn't really have the bandwidth. But since what we care most about is that you have a good emotional experience, that is the sort of thing we'll invest our time and money in. So at D23, we tested that with several thousand conference attendees, not at all an unbiased sample, right? They're all fan club members. But that went well, and then we did a play test this summer at Disneyland. We did another play test. Did anyone look at the Legends of Frontierland experience? If I say LARPing, who knows what that means?
There we go.
What are the immediate stereotypes that come to your head with LARPing? It's not very flattering, is it? No.
Okay.
Live action role playing. LARPing is live action role playing.
Nice.
And we did an experiment with that, which we are not calling LARPing. If you Google Legends of Frontierland at Disneyland this summer, we have the world's most beautiful sets, right? Exquisite buildings and furnishings and railings and carts and such that tell a specific story about a time and a place. So creatively, what can you do with that? That's the high-level idea. Right. Somebody has to own that. Right. One of the things that are consistent through every design process is a champion. Right. Somebody who owns that, who keeps running it up, because brainstorming meetings are super fun. Right. Note cards go on the wall, things get thrown everywhere, there's pictures, but somebody has to collect that data, quantify it, and then share it with the group. And it's that person, the single thread through it, who actually makes things happen more often than not, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea.
We call that owning the donut.
Owning the donut, yes. Somebody needs to own that donut.
That's right.
And especially, that's a lot of what I have done through my career, is be the donut owner. Right. Often because it's an awesome idea that I really want to happen. Right. And also sometimes it's not very specifically outlined who does that. Right. So the Legends of Frontierland involved us pretending that that space was a space in the Wild West, and as you entered it, it felt exactly like it would if you entered any space in the Wild West in 18 whatever.
So I would come dressed up as Billy the Kid?
You would interact with folks who were, and if you wanted to, you could.
I see.
Would
I be LARPing if I
You would be LARPing, yes.
Dressed as Billy the Kid?
Correct, the mundo.
It's
Anyone want to guess what the number one proposal from our guests was that we do in this space?
Shoot out at the OK Corral.
Doctor Who.
Oh, gosh, I'm so wrong.
Which, of course, we couldn't. It's not our IP, and it doesn't fit the story. This is a town that you wander into. In the beginning of this summer, from about June to September 27th, we ran this play test. In the beginning of the summer, it had a very strict set of rules as to what your interactions were. Guests are far smarter than us. They're more deeply engaged. They create really wonderful stories over time, and we let it go. At one point, there was one job you could do, which was you would go to the telegraph office and get a telegram, which was the most boring thing ever, because then you had a telegram, and you're like, I have to go tell that guy something. Well, the minute we swapped it to Pony Express, that's fun, right? The Pony Express is really fun, and you get to run really fast around. People came day after day. They would play for an hour at a time. People came and would play for 7 or 8 hours in a full day. There were challenges. I could challenge you to a staring contest, but we did it with Tabasco and lemon juice in our mouth. So that's fun, right?
A certain kind of fun, yes.
Different kind of fun. There was jail, and we encouraged children to draw wanted posters of, we would pull out of you in a card game or something, very non-scripted.
Of their parents.
Something naughty you had done.
Oh, okay.
Drove fast, ate all the peanut butter, and the kids would draw these really great wanted posters, and anyone else in the park would arrest your parent and put them in jail. At one point, one of our goats from the ranch was in jail. And so our guests created these absolutely beautiful, rich, rich worlds. Part of the experience involved collecting bits, little wooden coins, to purchase property, and every time you went to jail and got out, you got a little bit of money for your time. And we ran out of the little wooden coins long before the experience was due to end. It was only an X-week experience. We didn't have a budget for more wooden coins. What do? Turn it back to the guests. Like they're creating this world, this very rich experience. So we put a call out saying, just think of Fort Knox running out of gold, right? We run out of coins. What's going to happen? The next day, a gentleman came through the front gate dressed like the Monopoly guy with a top hat and a monocle and a briefcase. And he walks down Main Street, walks to Frontierland, opens up. He has all the bits. He's been collecting them all summer. And he sold bonds against his bits. Is that something we would have thought up? Nope. But just throwing it open to a very creative and a very passionate community allowed them to solve the problem for us. So we've moved from 2D on a screen or storybook, radio, to these immersive spaces, theaters, to now we're moving into much more interaction, and not only me pushing buttons sort of interaction, but also me as a human in these stories interacting.
Well, that's fantastic. I do want to ask you specifically about, because we've got a guy coming from Mad Pow, who's a really top top-notch kind of experience design person. Lots of people do it, but I mean, it's the foreground of what they do. That's the purpose of their business. And I think it's one of the big takeaways for the students in this class is this, again, pursuant to the idea that it's not like you're just born creative or not. This is a real method.
Right.
That like experience mapping and experience design, surely in what you guys do, you must do experience mapping all the time.
Absolutely.
Like when I go to your park, I remember, I remember like it was yesterday going to, I guess it's Disney World in Orlando with my then, I don't know, 6-year-old son. I would say it was about 145 degrees.
And super humid.
It was so scorchingly hot. I just thought, my God, how is this going to work? And he's just like unrestrained in his excitement. And then there were great parts, and there were parts that you guys have been addressing, like standing in line too long and so forth. But surely, like with the parks, it must be doing experience maps almost on a monthly basis of like
Correct.
against now. So when you lay out all the sequences from thinking about going to what I was watching on television that just made me decide that it was time to take my kid to fly to Orlando and do this, to parking, to all that stuff. It must be 100 touch points at least, maybe more.
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming that you measure against lots of variables at each touch point. I might be, how much money I'm spending, but also how happy I am, how happy the kid is.
Yep.
The parent's really happy at this thing, but the kid's having a terrible time, and vice versa. Can you tell us a little bit about how that goes? Because I think that's such a clear illustration of the rationalization of this operation.
Yeah, and there is expertise in this, folks who have expertise in how we make decisions, and that has really changed over time. Generations. When Disneyland opened in 1955, a family was one mother, one father, 2 kids, the dog, which you left at the kennel, and how you experienced the park was very different than guests do today. Right. You might have a group of 6th, 8th grade girls come in the gate as a group, and they experience the park very differently than 3 teenage boys would, or multi-generations would, or in Disneyland, most of our guests are repeat guests within the past year. So they have a different experience than folks in Disney World, many of whom only go. Which is more of a destination. Right, it's many parks, many hotels, lots more retail, shopping, water parks and the like. They may go only once in their entire life, right? So how they save for it's different, how they experience it is different, and we want to make sure that every phase of that is as successful as possible. One of our researchers, Martin Bose, who just joined us, he did his postdoc at Harvard and then joined us in our Pittsburgh lab. He's an expert in what makes people happy and how do happy people behave. Not how do I make you behave so you're happy, but intuitively how do happy people make choices and decisions, and then how can we incorporate that? And everything from, he just finished an interesting research project and how to get you to not overindulge at a buffet. Because guess what, if you overindulge at a buffet, you're not happy. And what decisions lead you to thinking you have to? How do we give you more information to make those decisions? And so we're measuring at every phase, not only, so for a project like that, we actually are measuring garbage. He says he lost a really nice pair of Italian loafers standing on a scale, measuring garbage for a week. So there's quantifiable data, how much food goes out, how much comes back, what percentage of healthy foods do people choose versus unhealthy. And then there's also more subjective data, which is Disney Research, which is a group that has a little iPad that'll survey you. Have you ever done that? Or once you've been to a park, they'll send you email after the fact to survey you. Those types of surveys tend to be overly positive. And we know that, so we correct for that. But then also there's ways, is there anything we can tell about your body language, your posture? One of Martin's, he's Martenbos, if you want to Google him. One of his most famous bits of research is power from devices. So if you're on a little handheld device, your posture is physically prey. You look like, how you hold yourself, and you also physiologically feel like that. Your body is flooded with chemicals that tell you you're prey. When you're a little wider on a tablet, you feel a little more self-confident and you're perceived a little more. A laptop or a computer, desktop computer is the same. What's funny, when he gives this lecture, everybody they're like, I'm really important. Well, not more important than my boss. Like there's this constant squirming to get
To be relaxed and therefore
be
open?
relaxed but powerful.
Right, right.
But these things are happen in our lives anyhow when we're not aware of them. So understanding what sorts of things that people do or can we help them to do to change their experience, that's another data point for us.
Right, right. Well, I think this is an area where this group in particular can be very self-conscious about articulating what touch points might be. You know, they're going to do an assignment, their last assignment in this course is going to be to create an experience map of any, you know, I'll give them a lot of examples, but they can do it of anything, of any experience, because it's such a flexible and useful tool. But then also measure against multiple criteria, because I think that's what distinguishes this from simply are you happy or are you satisfied?
Yeah.
No, be specific. I'm happy here, but I feel like I'm spending too much money.
Right.
Or I'm physically comfortable, but I'm anxious.
Right. Or and also, I'm happy because I just survived something terrifying.
Yeah, well, that's right. I'm happy because that last thing is over with.
Right.
That's a great
And you know,
point.
those like your coasters and Terra, which is a drop. You need to recover from those things, and then when you get this whole fight or flight, and then you win, and then you get this rush of endorphins of woohoo. So that doesn't mean that scary things don't exist at all in these worlds.
Right.
It means that it's a full cycle. And the easiest question, the hardest question to ask yourself is, how do you want your guests to feel?
Right.
Are you scared? Are you excited? Are you overwhelmed? Are you awed? And this is for a museum exhibit. This is for a restaurant. This is for a theme park or for a movie. How do you want that person to feel? And then how are you getting there? Students will often say, I had a thesis pitch last night from Savannah College of Art and Design. Here's my thesis pitch. Architectural projection in a restaurant. I'm like, That's not a creative pitch. That is the very last line. That's the technical solution. What are you pitching? Is this a medieval times jousting knight kind of thing? Is this a Sagos thing?
What is the problem to be solved?
Right, what is the problem to be solved?
You're telling me one solution to an unarticulated problem. Yeah, that's what defining is all about. Defining the problem to be solved, because we get this in architecture all the time. Because being creative and coming up with multiple solutions sometimes terrifies people until they do it a bit more. It's like public speaking. People want to race to the first solution that occurs to them.
Right.
Almost irrespective of what the problem is. At least I've got a solution. I'm not going to be that person who doesn't have an answer.
And you know what? That works sometimes. It's just not particularly innovative.
Right. Well,
have you ever seen the TED Talk on muses? Has anyone seen that? The woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love?
Oh, what's her? I know that woman's name. I haven't seen it.
In ancient Greece, a muse lived in your walls, and they came out of the walls and through you and gave you good ideas. And you were just the vessel. You were the one who wrote it down or sculpted it, whatever. But you never had any personal accountability for that idea. That model has very much shifted now, and we put personal pressure on ourselves that we are the muse, we are the creative genius, and if we can't do it, well, it's very dramatic and we become very overwrought, or we just quit the whole industry. But how many people here can sing opera? How many people have taken a single opera lesson? That might be why you can't sing opera. So we put, can you sing opera? Oh, I thought he was raising his hand. So think about that in terms of creativity as well, or anything, engineering or swimming. Like, there's a part of you that may be natural talent, but there's a heck of a lot of training necessary as well. And a lot of that training is iterative. Try, fail, repeat. Try, fail, repeat. Try, fail, repeat.
That's the essence of the design thinking diagram, and it is the essence of being good at it.
There's no good business reason for us to celebrate those, which is why you don't hear about them from us or any other company where things go horribly, horribly wrong. But they usually go horribly wrong in a simulation or in a mock-up before any actual human has seen them.
We're going to open it up to questions here in just a second, but I wanted to get at one more sort of big picture distinction, and that is, the direction of the process when you guys are coming up with a new park or a new idea for a park or a new experience of any kind. surely, at the beginning as we view the gauzy golden age of Walt Disney, first coming up with his little showboat thing and then working it to Disneyland, we see storytelling at the start emerging into an experience.
Right.
But nowadays, it's a gigantic corporation. Surely, many of the projects come the other direction. That is, we have let's say there's a clothing market that we want to get into, or mind you, we'll do it with this mission of be good and make people happy, but it comes from the other end, and you have to kind of reverse engineer an experience or story. So sometimes you must start, like, let's say, there's a demographic that is underrepresented in our business, that as it happens, 30-year-old men until ESPN were not as engaged with Disney as we'd like them to be. Is that how ESPN happened? Or
No, ESPN happened because they were part of the Cap Cities purchase. The Walt Disney Company wanted a conduit to push our content through. So we bought a television conglomerate, which included ABC. ABC was the biggie that we wanted.
I remember.
But ESPN was part of that, as well as several hundred radio stations. So that meant we had to sell off some other things. There were regulatory rules about what you can and can't have.
Right.
And ESPN was part of that bundle, which then became one of the most valuable hats on our rack.
Isn't that interesting? Because think about, the demographic of ESPN, for example, which, by the way, probably is now maybe, is gigantic, but still, initially, it was intended, who were perceived to be the people that you would create a 24-hour sports network for. They would presumably not be the same people who were necessarily going to the parks.
Yeah, at the time, no.
And
probably
now they've all bled into each other, I suppose. Well, that's really interesting, because I think it is important to understand that we approach that it's not a linear process for even defining the problem. The problem,
and it's not so easy. Life keeps interfering with life. Like we can be on great trajectories, and then 9/11 can happen, and literally planes aren't flying.
Right.
What do you do when for a month there's not a single plane taking a guest to your park in Orlando?
Right.
There's creative and technology and business decisions that happen on the fly in response to those sorts of realities. We had, I don't know if you've heard of Anna and Elsa. They're super popular. We have meet and greets in the parks, which on Easter Sunday was a 4-hour wait. People were waiting in the 100 degrees humidity with their children to meet these characters, and we decided unacceptable. Whether or not you choose to do that with your children, we are not going to allow that to happen. And so there was no pushing or shoving or anything. It was the politest line ever. But we decided, so then we rearranged that property so that there was a stage show. Several times a day, several thousand people at a time could sit and have an experience with those characters without having to stand.
Because that's really what the deliverable they wanted anyway. Yeah, interesting.
There's also a new, has anyone seen Storytime with Belle in Florida? It's awesome. The character meet and greets tended to be, you're my parent, and that's Mickey Mouse. I go to Mickey Mouse, and all my parents see is the back of my head. They don't see if I'm happy or sad or scared, and they sort of miss that magical moment. And then by the time I turn around to have my picture with Mickey Mouse, it's super awkward and weird. and it's not very meaningful. It's only a few seconds or minutes rather with the character. So we rethought that whole experience because it is about getting to spend time with the character. So Storytime with Belle, which is in Disney World, just opened up, revolutionized how you engage with characters. You enter by walking into Belle and Maurice's house. The furniture is set up in such a way that it's actually a line, but you kind of don't realize it's a line. You just, there just happens to be a spinning wheel in the way, so you go around it. You walk into Maurice's garage, and the first thing the cast member says is, oh, there's something neat on the wall. All the little kids come up close so you can see it. Well, then what we've done is just sort the shorter kids from the parents. We go through a magic window. I saw this being built. I saw the patents. I still blows my mind every time I see this. And then we are in the castle. And we are all going to do a play. We're going to tell the story to Belle of how she met and fell in love with the Beast. We're going to repeat this story to her. Every child in the room who wants to be in the play is in the play. You might be a napkin or a salt and pepper shaker, but you get to be, so nobody is denied the opportunity to participate. Then we all file into the Grand Library, and we're all excited, we're getting ready, and then Belle comes in and the children tell her story. You have, and I'm the single chick, right? I'm not in there with a child. It is an unusually intimate experience with somebody else's child because it's safe to do that. You're in an environment where you're watching really amazing things happen. These kids are excited to be part of something big. So I was watching the show the other day. We can get many more people through per hour, by the way, than the regular meet and greet. And the little boy who was chosen to be Beast, who has a cape on, he was severely autistic and not very verbal. And every time he had to do his lines, he put his cape over his head. And he said his line. He did a good job, but he put his cape over his head. And then Belle came up, and he gets up on his toes, and he says, "Would you like to dance? I've been waiting for this moment my entire life." And I'm all like, "What's happening? What is that? I don't even know that kid." But there's a connection that happens, and that's what we're constantly looking for. We know that guests want to meet these characters. They want to be a part of their universe and their story. This is one way to do it, but that is a completely different and a much more rewarding way to do it. Oh, hey, operationally and business-wise, it makes more sense, too.
Sounds like a good solution.
Yeah. Look for more similar.
Do we want to get any questions up in the mic here? They know that they'll be electrocuted if they.
Well,
if they
and
come up.
you guys are on the 5-year mandatory co-op program still, aren't you?
Not all these majors. I think most all of you. How many are planning to do 2 co-ops?
There are.
How many are planning to do 0 co-ops? Okay, so
Alrighty.
so they're definitely engaged with
Yeah, and I think
experiential
that people
education.
don't realize, at Imagineering alone, which is one arm of the giant conglomerate, there are about 2,000 Imagineers and over 200 job titles. There's lots of things I don't think you realize we do, and that's just my little group, wider than that. So if you're interested, and they have a mandated co-op or internship, and it's not clear to you on our careers site, disneycareers.com, let me know and I can point you real quickly to where some of the internships are, where some of the advanced internships are, some which are great experience in terms of operations and public service, others which are nitty-gritty engineering, whatever is most of interest to you.
Fantastic. Okay, we use Twitter to get as the vehicle to get the shy.
Do we have
to
a
ask
Twitter
questions.
fall somewhere?
It manifests itself in Kate. It just goes electronically through her phone, and now she will voice the first question.
When you were an Imagineer, being at the intersection of creativity and engineering, did you ever struggle to balance the people on either side? For example, was there ever disparity between the creative design people and the engineers in what they wanted to do or what they thought was possible, and how did you deal with that?
Only every single day, every single minute of every single day. And part of that is it's not everybody's job to know everything. You know, if you're brought on board as the foremost authority in data analysis, how that data is used or why it's necessary isn't your subject matter area of expertise. And there is conflict, particularly when money is involved or safety, for example. You know, you'd be surprised how many folks. I ran an event the other day in a large space like this that had 9 doors around it, and particularly my European engineers who aren't familiar with American safety rules really were upset they couldn't block half the doors. And I had to explain, like, America's so stupid. And I'm like, okay, it is, but how do I help you get what you need done, but you're not blocking that door? So it's a matter of anticipating it. At the very beginning, stating very clearly what the actual end goal is. And it's not for you to get a patent in this thing. It's to solve that problem, which may mean that you can get a patent in that thing. But it's just silly if you presume that doesn't happen every day, and it's healthy. It has to happen. I had one of my students the other day. I had 2 project proposals, one which had a group of technical theater majors in it. They went to the Tallahassee Town Hall and pulled the blueprints for this building they were talking about. And another group said, how on earth did you know to do that? And they said, oh, because we're theater guys and we know that there's blueprints. So the next project, that team got blueprints. And so you learn from each other each time as well.
Right. I would add, actually, and especially for my engineer friends, because as an architect, I've worked with engineers a lot. And you know, it's important to welcome the fact that other people will be bringing other things to the enterprise. There's a tendency, I think, sometimes to, in all of us, to prioritize the expertise we bring to the project at the expense of the expertise that others do. And I think successful teams don't work that way.
Right.
You know. Kate, do we have another?
How has your 2 decades of work at Disney affected your career? Disney brands themselves as the happiest place on earth. How has this label affected the Disney Research Labs?
Have you collapsed into alcoholism, or what is the
Desperate waves of tears. No. So it's interesting because people are stunned that I've been at Disney for 20 years. I've had 17 bosses in 20 years, so I absolutely not had the same job. What I always have had is the job I have, and then there's the job I want, and so I kind of do them both, and then the job I want becomes a job that somebody else wants me to do. So I've had this interesting career where doing something, and then, for example, I serve on a lot of boards. I advise all of our internship programs around the country. That's not my job. It's not my job. I'm on vacation today, by the way. It's not my job to be here today, but these are the sorts of things that add value to the company and add value to me when they say, do we know anyone at Northeastern? And I can say, yes, boop, boop, boop. I have, in 3 years, asked for a demotion because there was a really neat job that I wanted to do, something fun, interesting, usually an adventure, that was beneath my current pay grade. The first time I asked for this, nobody knew how to do it. I could leave the company for a day and come back, but I would have lost some of my pension and other things as a result. And they figured it out, HR figured it out for me. So it's not necessarily that I wasn't happy in the role I had, it's just that there was something really interesting and challenging along the way. I can tell you I've never worked less than a 60 or an 80-hour week, but it's crazy fun, right? You know, when I'm taking 20 interns at midnight to Disneyland to beta test this Frontierland experience we did this summer, that is nothing that a red bill can't fix, right?
And also the sun's not out.
Correct.
Right. That's the one, when you guys solve that problem, let me know.
Yeah, well, I once had a creative proposal of rainbows on cue over our castle, and I had done the simple math on that, and then I handed it to our senior optics engineer, and I said, this would be a great creative solution. And he went away and he came back and he said, yes, here's how you do it. We just need a light source brighter than the sun.
That's it?
That's all we needed, and so that hasn't happened yet.
Let's do one or two more.
And this is a job, don't forget. There are expense reports, and every year I have to take mandated sexual harassment training online, how to handle chemicals safely, anything that you
Do you
would
do those at the same time?
you do them in a block.
Safe
so
chemical
like
handling
in
and-
like 6
and
hours,
sexual
you'll
harassment,
just
right.
hammer through all this mandatory testing, how I have to use a P card, a purchasing card.
Right.
And that's part of being corporate America, right? But then that's also when the Walt Disney Company is the single largest grantor of Make-A-Wishes, about 80%, and we don't own them. A lot of people presumably do. That's a third party. That's also part of being in corporate America. So expense report, get to host awesome kids, balances out.
How hard is it being an adult to empathize with children in order to effectively design for Disney?
Excellent question.
That is a great question, and as much as we all say, oh, no, I get it, you don't. You absolutely, particularly when you see how short these folks are and what their point of view is. That's why we constantly do play testing with guests. We constantly work with our own families and children and grandparents and bring that experience to bear. It's our job to constantly educate us on those things. No matter how smart or diverse or open-minded you think you are, everybody has a point of view that is of value to you. I beta tested a robotic stroller the other day. This is one of my own guys' ideas. Said this stroller is awesome. Maybe we offer it as an upsell. A woman I work with said, well, I'll beta test it. And she has a husband and 2 little bitty babies. It's 35 pounds. Getting that thing up and onto the tram was impossible.
Right.
And I could look at a spec sheet and say 35 pounds. I have no idea what 35 pounds equals, but it wasn't until you put it in a mother's hands that you get that data. So it's twofold. Keep ourselves aware and actually connect with those points of view.
That bit about empathizing with kids. If you are ever standing at a family gathering with 3 or 4 other full-size humans, short or tall relative to us, it matters not a whit. People between 5 and 6 feet tall, let's say. And you look down at the 3-year-old who's standing there, and you imagine what it must be like for that kid. It's like us standing with people that are 21, 25 feet tall, and wondering why we appear scared.
Yeah.
And by the way, you haven't probably had children yet, but the difference between that scenario and when my son was little, I would put him on my shoulders and suddenly he would be 7 feet tall, it just changed his life.
He's
It was
king
like,
of the world.
It was like, Dad, can we just keep doing this? Can you come to school with me?
One of the
this is
first
really
things I
excellent.
have my interns do is squat, walk around the office, squatting to see what the point of view is. Get that file out of the top drawer, they can't reach it, and then also stand on their desks and look at their office and realize what things are filthy that they could never see before.
Right.
But just that difference of 2 feet this way and 3 feet that way puts it top of mind of while things are different. We also at Imagineering, we do an activity every year called a Walk in Our Guest Shoes, where we enter the park as a guest and have to do everything that we've never done.
Right.
I stood in line 75 minutes to meet a princess. I had never done that. We also each spend time in a wheelchair with the other cast member pushing us. And the first thing they tell us when we start that is, this is not about you taking notes on name tags, who was mean or rude to you, right? This is about you as a guest experiencing it. And I'm glad they told us that, because the first thing you want to do is report Susie Lou Who, because she was not polite to you, getting you on the, you want to make it an individual issue instead of how, as Imagineers, how can we better design these facilities so that situation never happens in the first place?
Right. Well, this has been a fabulous education in the empathy part, along with the others, but really the central role that empathy plays in really being a good designer and being a good creative person.
And it's where we are right now. So we started as agrarian farmers. We moved through the Industrial Revolution and other major economic models. We are right now in what's called the experience economy. And so whether it's the doctor's office or the museum or school, humans expect more from each other, and we're giving more to make these experiences more valuable. Has anyone seen the North Face experience that just came out last week? First of all, not America, because this would so not fly in America. There are shoppers in South Korea at a North Face, which is a clothing manufacturer, cold weather gear usually. And as they're shopping, the floor starts to disappear, starts to slide away under into a wall. So pretty soon they have to grab onto climbing things that are on the wall because it's a sports store. So then they're hanging on the side of the wall. And then what they wanted comes out of the ceiling in the middle of the room. Every single one of them jumps for it, leaps off the wall and grabs that, whatever, puffy coat and wins. That's an experience economy. That's making my shopping experience something entirely different. But when you look at the video, they've got like a little 2-minute video online promoting this. The music is very aspirational. We want them to do well. We don't think they're scared or crazy or shy. You put me in the point of view of wanting them to succeed, and then when they do succeed, it's just complete raucous celebration. Look around. That is how advertising is going right now. That is how shopping experiences are going, particularly the Olympics and the Super Bowl. Nail this in terms of their ads. Who remembers the Procter & Gamble ads from the Olympics? Celebrating moms. You're crying over Tide, right? And a snowboarder who fell and skinned his knee. Like, what does this have to do with laundry? But the experience economy is exactly how we're moving, and we're thrilled. We don't consider that competition. We consider it
Validation.
Validation, as well as we need to up our game if the rest of the world is up in their game as well.
Well, MK, I want to thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. Huskies.